Go. Hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is My Life as a Landlord. I am so pleased you joined me for today's show. My guest today hails from Toronto and is a CPA in Canada. He has a partnership with a US-based CPA firm to help with folks like me who do cross-border stuff, but also people who don't do cross-border stuff. This is good. He's also just written a book to help the not just Canadian real estate investors. Welcome to the show, Michael Matthew. Hi.
Great to be here.
Yay. So you're a CPA in Canada. I have to ask because this is what's going on in January of 2025. What do you think of President-elect Trump trying to make Canada the 51st state? What's the consensus in Toronto? Is that going
No is the short answer.
to happen? Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Let's talk about the proposed tariffs that are being threatened. Do you think that that's going to actually happen? And if it does, how is that going to impact both the US and Canada, you think?
The tariffs I see are essentially a negotiating tool for President Trump to get a better deal as he sees it with the Canadian trade that's going on. Ultimately, tariffs only will work if the domestic producers can produce at a price below what the tariff price would be. So let's say uh, you're bringing in cars uh, from from Canada, which is part of a big part of our trade actually,
Sure.
and you'll sell it for $30,000, and now there's a tariff for 25%, so that'd be 37.5.
Hmm.
If you can't produce cars for less than 37.5, it'd be cheaper to keep bringing them in and pay the tariff. So it only works if you're trying to protect a domestic industry that is being somehow unfairly competed against.
Hmm.
Otherwise, the consumers will start complaining, why am I paying, maybe 50,000 for a car just so it's all made in America? I'd rather pay the lower price. And ultimately, that would carry the day. That said, I don't see it getting that far. There are a lot of interested parties on both sides of the borders to make sure that doesn't happen. Doesn't mean there can't be a change in the trade relationship. Doesn't mean it can't be improved. But ultimately,
Hmm.
I think it's just an opening negotiating ploy. When you're trying to sell, let's say, your house, do you give the absolute lowest price you'll accept as a starting amount? No. You always give a higher price because maybe someone really wants your house. Maybe you'll get lucky and they'll buy it. But mostly you expect to be negotiating down. And that's why you come in asking for more than you expect to get. Same thing
Hmm.
here.
I know the last time that Donald Trump was president, Michael and I were actually building here in Hawaii, and there was a tariff placed on the lumber coming from Canada, which supplies all the lumber in Hawaii. Ironically, is a Canadian based lumber mill, and we were in shock. Mike and I were in shock, going, "Oh my gosh! If these tariffs do come about, if they do you see that impacting real estate? Maybe not. Maybe they're not going to happen at all, but if they did, you think that's going to impact real estate?"
Absolutely. And as you
Mm.
just pointed out, the building materials would be hit immediately. I work in addition to my other duties as a CFO and CTO for a home builder. And what people who aren't in the business don't understand is when we sign a deal with you as someone who wants us to build you a home, that price is locked in. So if our inputs go up, like during the pandemic, the price of lumber quadrupled,
Hmm. Right.
we just had to eat that. We couldn't go to the buyer and say, you know, it's not our fault, but the price of lumber has gone up by 400%. We kind of need to up the price of your house. That's actually illegal. So breach of
Wow.
contract, among other things. And I know even just in the case of a limited supply, one condo developer in the Toronto area decide to cancel all the existing contracts and resell those units at the now current market price, which is substantially higher. And I think they're out of business now because they just got sued out of existence.
Right. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, excuse me. Let's talk about real estate investing, continuing to talk about real estate investing. And I know we're not talking about cross-border stuff just yet, but I keep hearing people say, oh, I want more passive income. I'm going to invest in real estate. Is real estate investing truly passive from how you see it?
Not if you own the real estate directly.
Oh, okay. What do you mean?
Let's, if you own the real estate directly, there's always some hands-on work that needs to be done, even if it's only managing the managers.
Okay.
So I typically recommend when someone is looking to get a rental property in place that they budget for a property manager, even if they're able and willing to do the property management themselves, because that means it's a good deal for you to invest in. If the only way you can make the numbers work is to do your own property management, there's just not enough profit there. And if there's just one thing goes wrong, some unexpected repair, then you're wiped out in terms of your profit. It also depends what you're investing in. So for instance, the property I own, very close to my own home actually, is in a condo tower. So all the exterior walls, windows, etc., any repairs to that is covered by the condominium corporation itself. I don't have direct responsibility.
Mhm.
So in that case, there's very little that I have to deal with. It's maybe one or two plumbing or electrical repairs a year. That's it.
Mhm.
But that's only in the case of a situation where you're only looking after the insides, basically, of the unit as opposed to the whole thing. Uh, If you're investing indirectly in real estate, that means, for instance, you're participating in a private equity deal that's tied into real estate. There, you just write a check and you get interest coming back. So I know of one such deal in a community not far from Toronto where they target buildings that are a little bit run down and have fairly small units because they have a very specific client avatar, which is young couples. And why they want young couples? Because within, say, 3 to 5 years, there's a good chance they're going to want to start a family and they'll have to move out. And why is that good for the owner? Because then they can come in, update the unit, fresh coat of paint, refresh the appliances, a few other cosmetics, and now rent that market, uh, get that market rate rental for that now vacated unit. And
Mhm.
over a period of a couple of years, let's say 5 years, virtually everyone in the building would have moved out. And once you establish that as your tenants, then the people who come into the building are going to be much more likely to be of that same demographic. Because if you're someone who, let's say, is near retirement age and this will, quote, be your last ever home, you're probably not going to be want to be surrounded by a bunch of young families, just a lot of noise, a lot of bustle, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy after a while. In that case, it really is passive, but direct ownership, there always something, even if you just have to instruct the property manager, even if you just have to uh, keep up with the property taxes, other things. There's tenant complaints, of course, is a big one. And if you make the mistake of introducing yourself as the owner, then even if they know there's a property manager in place, many tenants will just call you as the owner directly.
Mhm.
And so I know some people that their way around that is if they are, let's say, doing the repairs themselves, they'll never identify themselves as the owner.
Mhm. They
They'll just
work
say,
for
no,
the owner.
I'm just
They
here to
work for
fix
the
things.
owner.
I work for the owner. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Makes
getting,
sense.
calls in the middle of the night because the toilet's blocked is, you know, one of the least favorite parts of being a landlord. And uh, that's why you want, I think, to have a property manager in place as much as possible.
For sure. Makes sense. It makes sense. So, yeah, it's very interesting how people look at passive investments, whether they're writing a check and they're a limited partner on, a syndication of some kind. So then it's
Right.
mailbox money. But even then, you still need to monitor what's going on with that asset. I mean, I would. It's still not, it's not $100. It's usually, 100,000 or more dollars. So it's usually not a small amount of money. But if I'm the direct owner, which for our properties, we are the direct owner, we still have, a team of people. And so it's interesting. And I've heard of other people saying, yes, I work for the owner. Well, my tenants know that we're the owners, right? But I encourage them. I encourage them to talk to us. I also encourage them to report to the team if when, the toilet is blocked in the middle of the night or something floods or something like that. So yeah, very interesting.
How you
Let's
maintain that relationship makes a big difference, right?
It
It seems
does.
like you've got a pretty good relationship with your tenants. And uh, what I've done, I think every tenant I've ever had at Christmas, I send a holiday uh, centerpiece for their
Okay.
table. So it's got a bunch of,
Aw.
evergreen, mini branches and things like that, and little
Yeah.
twigs and bows and things like that.
Oh.
And it costs less than a couple $100, but I think it gets me quite a bit of goodwill because they
Yeah.
don't expect it, at least not the first time.
Well, and it's interesting because we're recording this in early January of 2025, and before Christmas, there was a lot of questions on social media of exactly that that question of, do you give your tenants something for Christmas? And so I chimed in, and we give our tenants usually a grocery gift card and a handwritten thank you note. And it always says the same thing: thank you for allowing us to support your housing journey. Because most of the time, these tenants are not going to be with us forever. Some of them are. Some of them have been with us for a very long time, and they'll probably be with us until they pass, and that's okay. There's other people that the main reason we're going to lose them is they're going to buy a house. But when they get their grocery gift card, I want them to go, wow, what landlord does that? Now, it's not a lot of money. It's a $25 gift card for the local grocery store. And we do that on both sides of the border, by the way. Sometimes the US one, depending on how many tenants and what we can afford, we might go as much as $50. But still, even a gesture like a centerpiece, it's something unique, and it does cement that relationship, especially if you're a self-managing landlord. So well done. I like that idea. That's cool. I like the centerpiece idea.
Thank you.
Let's keep going with uh let's see what would make the most sense. Let me jump into your book. So your book, I first of all, I love the name of your book, From A to Zen Real Estate. Now, so you're a CPA in Toronto, and I have to laugh because when you first told me the name of your book, I didn't Google it. I was like, okay, I'm writing it, A to Zen. He goes, no, no, A is spelled EH, and I went, of course it is. A to Zen Real Estate Peace of Mind Strategies for the Canadian Investor. Now, so I devoured this book, by the way. I read it cover to cover. Really, really excited. Easy read, but you've got a lot
Good.
of complex things in here. Let's talk about some of the stuff in here if you're up for it.
Sure.
Now, I do have a structure from my Canadian company because I have a Canadian BC based company going into the US because Mike and I are
Yeah.
both dual citizens. So I know we're getting really nitty gritty into the weeds here, but for for the US taxpayer, an LLC is basically a flow through entity, and it's going to end up on your personal US tax returns. But you say
Exactly right.
specifically in the book, as a Canadian, you don't want to be directly taxed. You don't want to have, what is it? It's important you do not own an LLC directly. Why not?
Correct. Correct. Because the system that works very well for US taxpayers, like you just mentioned, the LLC is a flow-through or sometimes called a disregarded entity. All the income and expenses flow through to the US personal tax return. That's the end of it. And at the same time, you have the protection of a corporate structure such that your personal assets would not be at risk if, let's say, somebody comes over to visit your tenant and they slip and fall on the driveway. They can't go after you personally because you don't own it personally. The LLC does. Okay.
Mhm.
The problem is Canadians could have an LLC that owns a property. They'd have the same results on the US side, which is they would flow through the income expenses from their LLC to their US personal tax return.
Mhm.
No problem there. The problem comes when they have to file their Canadian taxes. Unlike the US, I had to look it up because there's only one other country in the world that does it this way, which is Eritrea in North Africa. Every other country in the world taxes based on residency. US and Eritrea tax based on citizenship, meaning if you're a US citizen anywhere in the world, let's say you were born to diplomats, you may have never spent one day in the US, but you're required to file a US tax return once you start earning income.
Mhm.
Canadians have to declare their worldwide income, which would include their US income, on their Canadian personal tax return. Now, that's already been taxed in the US, so they would naturally want to claim those as what's known as a foreign tax credit on their Canadian return, so they don't have to pay twice.
Mhm.
Makes perfect sense to the taxpayer. However, the Canadian version of the IRS is called CRA, and they said, where are these tax credits coming from? Well, it's the tax credits I paid in the US. Okay. And where's that coming from? Well, I have this LLC that owns property and the income expenses flowed through. It said, hold on, what'd you say? The income expenses flow through. Yeah, we don't know what that means. There's no such thing as a flow through entity as far as the CRA is concerned. So what you're left with is you paid taxes on the personal level in the US, but Canada says, no, no, they're at the corporate level in Canada. And since they're mismatched, you can't claim them to reduce your Canadian personal tax, which means you paid full US personal tax on that amount, and then you pay full Canadian tax on the same amount, thereby creating double taxation. So don't do
That's
that.
fun. That's really fun. So how does a Canadian, so let's walk through this, okay? Because let's face it, I'm recording this on Maui. Most of Maui, well, I don't want to say most. There's a lot of Canadians on Maui. And there's a lot of Canadians who own property on Maui. A lot of them are condos. They come here, they share it with their family, they rent it out. Whatever they're doing,
Sure.
they have property here. Let's say you've got a client who says, Michael, I want to own a condo on Maui. How do you advise them to buy it? Would they buy it with an LLC or they need to structure it very carefully, obviously? How would you advise them, just as a hypothetical?
It depends on what it's going to be used for.
Okay.
If it's just going to be themselves and their family,
Hmm.
presumably their family's not going to sue them if they slip and fall.
Presumably.
Maybe you want to get a waiver signed, depends on your family, I suppose. Then in that case, you can own it personally. That's the
Okay.
simplest, it's the cheapest, but you're not earning any income.
Right.
As soon as you start running it as a business, then that's when you trigger this double taxation possibility. In that
Hmm.
case, I set up typically a triple C corporate structure. And to save people Google frustrations, you can't Google it because it's my own term. But it involves setting up a Canadian corporation which owns a C corporation, typically set up in Wyoming, which owns the LLC, and that's typically set up in the state of initial investment. So in this case, you could have your BC corporation owning the Wyoming C Corp, owning the Hawaii LLC. The LLC in Hawaii is the one that takes title.
Okay.
When it comes time to pay the income taxes on the rental income earned, then just like American residents, you flow through the income and expenses from the LLC. The difference is you don't flow it through to yourself personally for the reasons we just discussed. You
Mhm.
flow it through to your Wyoming C Corp. And since that's an American entity, you don't get into any foreign withholdings and all that kind of complications, and you pay the
Mhm.
tax that level. You can, in fact, go on to have as many properties in one LLC as you're comfortable with and as many LLCs as you want. So maybe you have 3 properties in each in 10 different LLCs in 10 different states.
Mm.
All of that income and expenses would flow through to the one Wyoming C Corporation, which would be the only entity that files taxes. None of the LLCs ever file taxes.
Gotcha. Wow. So that's very different than how Mike and I have it set up. And I'm not going to go into how we have it set up, but I'll just say that when we declared our non-residency in Canada, we paid a lot of money to the US and Canadian tax attorneys, and said, based on what we're doing, where should we claim our residency, and health insurance, this, because we spend a lot of time in Canada, and how would this work. And so I was very interested when I saw your triple C in here. I went, that is a very different way. It makes sense to me based on what Mike and I are doing. Completely different setup, but it's the same kind of thing. That, yeah, we don't own an LLC directly on the Canadian side. Very interesting. Let's see. I'm gonna look through the next one. Hang on just a sec here. I love how you talk about due diligence and making sure that you're doing your homework, even as a Canadian investing. I mean, it's a very, very easy read, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think for the listeners out here who are interested in this and just curious, this is such a great resource, Michael. I really appreciate that you've written this book. What made you decide you wanted to write a book?
I started going to these real estate conferences and business conferences in the US almost exactly 15 years ago now.
Mm,
And I was trying to figure out where I could best fit into things beyond owning property directly myself.
mhm.
And what I came to realize fairly quickly was many investors hated doing their taxes, were bad at doing their taxes, or were very good at not doing their taxes at all.
I do my taxes, I just don't like it.
So and they're terrified if they get contacted by the IRS or the CRA, depending on which side of the border they're on.
Right.
And I also found out very quickly that no one really knew why they're doing things the way they were doing.
Mhm.
So I would ask them, okay, I see you set yourself up like this. Why? And it turns out that most people, it comes down to one of 2 things. They're set up the same way the first person they spoke to was set up, or the same way as the last person they spoke to was set up. The problem was there's such a small group of Canadians at these conferences. I basically met them all. I knew the same people that they were talking to, and they didn't know why either. So I said, I got to get to the bottom of this. And after years of going back and forth and taking courses and speaking to people, I came up with, among other things, the triple C. And I told people, look, you're not good at doing taxes. You may do them right, but it takes you forever to do it, and you hate doing it. Let me do those for you. And the book is just an extension of all that, is being able to get people started on their real estate investment journey in a way that saves them a lot of the hassle of doing things incorrectly and learning on the job. And there's a lot of fear and ignorance, and that's around investing in general. And when you cross a border to do it, even more so. So I wanted to address whether you're just investing domestically or across the border,
Mhm.
many of the basic areas so that you know, yeah, there is a path forward here. There is a way to do this because you could, buy some stocks that turn out to be a bad investment and maybe you lose a couple $1,000. But if you buy the wrong real estate, it could bankrupt you if you do it
Hmm.
incorrectly. And I know I have a client that got caught up in a bidding war.
Oh,
And at that time, the way to get your bid accepted is to have as few conditions as possible on the offer. And so she elected to waive the property inspection.
oh no.
Some $30,000 of mold remediation later,
Ugh.
she's finally able to rent it out. And God bless her, but I don't think she's going to live long enough to make that money back,
Oh no.
especially when the rent is rent controlled.
Right.
So,
Michael, let's talk about the wealth transfer that's in motion right now with baby boomers becoming incapacitated, passing away. Greatest wealth transfer that the world has ever known is in motion at the moment, and there's a lot of people who are 9 to 5 job, whether you're a W-2 in the States or T4 in Canada. You're just regular employees of a job somewhere who are being thrown into real estate because they've inherited something.
right.
What do you say to them when, and it could be on either side of the border, this is just a generic question, but what do you say to them? How can you help them, especially if they are not necessarily business minded, not even real estate minded, not even just business minded? How do you help them in your capacity as a CPA?
Being a CPA, I start with the numbers
Okay.
because re real estate investment as a business needs to be treated as a business, which
Mhm.
means emotion doesn't come into it.
Mhm.
Whether you love the place, don't love the place, doesn't matter. Can you rent it out at a rent amount of rent that will make you money? If
Mhm.
it's a one that you're deciding, well, I don't want to rent it out, but I think if I fixed it up a little bit, I could sell it. Okay, well, then let's look at those numbers. And it really just comes down to the math of it all, right? If you're able to do a little bit of due diligence, find out what units are running for in that area, get a contractor to come through and give you a written estimate of what it would take to update, let's say, bathroom and kitchen are typically your biggest bang for the buck when it comes to renos.
Mhm.
But by the same token, you can't overdo it because it'll just cost you money.
Right.
So maybe your
Mhm.
family loves to swim and you say, you know what? Before I sell this place, I'm going to put a pool in the backyard. A lot of people will say, oh, I noticed you have a pool in the backyard. Yeah. Okay, I won't reduce my offer because of it, but they're certainly not going to increase it. They don't like to swim. There's huge legal liabilities around having a pool. You know, you have to have a fence and all this other stuff. So you have to be really judicious about where you spend your money because you can go overboard.
Mhm.
By the same token, if you're in an area where certain things are expected, as I believe there's an example in the book, if every kitchen in your neighborhood has a granite countertop, you better have a granite countertop because people will pay less for your home or pay a lower rent because this neighborhood that's expected. If no one has a granite countertop and you put one in because you love them, well, that's fine, but no one's going to pay you any extra for it.
Yeah, I completely understand. I completely understand. No, I appreciate that, especially as more and more folks are, they're reaching out on social media, they're listening to podcasts like this one, trying to figure out what do they do with these properties that they've inherited. And some of it they are emotionally tied to. You know, many of these are family homes that have been passed down that either their grandparents were in or they grew up in. But there's some emotional tie, and the words you're saying are very true, especially if they are not savvy in real estate. They're not only new to business, but they're new to real estate. And if they go in and they just completely, you know, do a decor overdo it on, you know, kitchen or bath or the whole house, you don't want to overbuild, but you also don't want to underbuild. And I like your analogy of the swimming pool, because there's a lot of people who will avoid a house because of a swimming pool, because they have toddlers and they don't want a pool.
Right.
But again, so you got to really look at the deal breakers of what's what. But when it all boils down to it, when people are inheriting these real estate portfolios, what do they want to do with it? If they just, you know, they don't want to do anything with it, then just sell it, or, you know, partner with someone like me and Mike, and, you know, let us help you expand it, and you know, that kind of thing, right? So it just depends on what they want to do. But let's turn this a little bit. There's a lot of folks reaching out to me who are biologically young, and I have to say it like that because they're young in age, but excuse me, ooh, they are savvy in real estate. They've watched all the YouTube videos. They're reaching out to me. They are very likely on some real estate investment team somewhere. Maybe they're a capital raiser, or they're a property manager that is learning at a commercial brokerage somewhere. And I'm talking US or Canadian. I'm getting approached on both sides of the border, and actually internationally now. Um, People are asking if they have no money, they're undercapitalized. And so I've got these biologically young, jet setting real estate investors who have no capital, but a lot of motivation. How do we help them launch? How do we keep going with that? You're looking at the numbers. What if they start at number zero?
The good news there is that everybody, I don't care who you are, if you're Elon Musk, well, maybe not him, but everyone else will run out of money at some point in investing. So whether you can take on one or two or 10 properties before you have to get outside investors, if you continue to grow, you will need them. So perhaps you're just starting your investment partnership journey a little bit sooner.
Mhm.
You need to raise funds, as simple as that. And someone who is bringing the knowledge to the deal like that is enthusiastic, willing to do all the work. There's a lot of doctors out there, a lot of dentists out there that have tons of money and no time for anything. They're not going to want to actively manage anything. But if you set up a joint venture deal with them where they supply the money and they do what they need to do to satisfy the joint venture requirements, which is they have to be involved at some level. They
Mhm.
can't just write a check, because
Right.
then that's like a syndication. You're getting into securities legislation, and I guarantee you, my clients included, there's several of them and many other investors out there that are running illegal syndications. They just don't know it.
Right.
But it can be as simple as once a month you attend a performance meeting, and the person who's doing all the work will say, here's what we're doing. We're renovating the properties. Here's what we spent so far. And you just go, okay, see you next month. That's enough typically to qualify as being involved in the management of the joint venture. So you just little things like that are important to know so that you stay on side. You're not likely to attract attention of the authorities on smaller deals, but you get
Mhm.
into a larger deal, you very much could get their attention, and you don't want their attention.
No. No, it's interesting, and if you've got I've got several people that are approaching me now who again are in their 20s, and they've been around real estate investment. They are in a 9 to 5 job somewhere, or maybe they're doing a side hustle or both. There's a lot of people who are doing garage sailing, and then they blow stuff out on eBay. But even in all of that, there is a level of credibility that is happening. There is a level of communication that they're establishing as they're doing all of this. And all of that counts. And this is what I always tell these folks who approach me and go, you know what, money is only the one aspect. And sometimes, depending on how you look at it, like you say, that might be the easy aspect if you've got folks, access to a pool of investors who have funds like doctors and dentists and people who are well capitalized but don't want to play necessarily full time in real estate. Yeah, very, very interesting. I wanted to turn to a question you have in your book, and this was about non-traditional lenders. Now, I am all about non-traditional lending, and so is Mike. When we, most people, when they say, "Oh, I want to buy a house," they instantly think, "I need 20%." They instantly think 20%. Why? Because that's the traditional down payment.
Right.
But
Hmm.
the question then becomes, if you're doing a non-traditional lender, maybe you don't need 20%. Um, where I'm going with this, I love you've got 3 levels of trust with a lender, and I've never seen it written so simply before. Do you have it, or you want me to read it? I'm happy to read it if you don't.
Yeah, you go ahead.
No, it's fine. So it says, for mom and pop lenders, you have to establish 3 levels of trust. This is so simple, it's awesome. 1, don't run off with my money. That's awesome. 2, don't lose my money. And then 3, make me money. I'm sorry. When I read that, I laughed, and Mike was like, "What are you laughing at?" And I just said it just like this. And he said, "Oh, he's nailed it. That's pretty much it." And so I have to laugh when you're talking about these hard money lenders or even institutional lenders. Yes, an institution might want 20% down, but the rules change. And I think that you've done a good job in rewriting the rules. Did you come up with these?
I'm sure I didn't. I've taken so many real estate courses myself that I'm sure I absorbed it from somewhere. But the first one is certainly a variation on Warren Buffett's number one rule of investing, right? And don't lose, one of them at least, don't lose money,
Yeah.
right? Rule number two, see rule number one.
No
You can
big.
recover from losing interest,
Hmm.
but you may not be able to recover from losing principal. That's what it comes down to, right?
Mm,
So,
interesting. No, this is all good. And I love that one of your last chapters is all about mindset. You've got a great quote from Theodore Roosevelt in here. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. That's pretty cool. I
yeah,
wanted to go ahead.
as much as I'm a numbers guy, what I've picked up from talking to successful investors and people who were interested but never seemed to break through, the difference comes down to mindset
Mhm.
because everyone has difficulties. The issue is, are you able to work through those difficulties? And having a proper mindset is a one way to do that. So one of my coaches talks about, actually several of them, there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback.
Ooh,
So
that's good.
if something goes wrong in your real estate business, you could beat yourself up about it forever, or you could say, thanks for the learning, let's not do that again, and move on to greater success down the road.
Mhm.
I make mistakes from time to time, and I'm going to make mistakes in the future, but my goal in life is to not repeat them,
Mhm.
to learn from them. Is there a system I could put in place to prevent that from happening again? Sometimes there isn't.
Right.
Sometimes it's just fact is totally out of your control. So in the instance of lumber quadrupling, what can you do about it? No one's building in a 400% cushion on materials when building a house because you'd never sell your house. It'd be too expensive in the first place. You're building in 15%, 20%, maybe 25% cushion, not 400%.
Yeah. Michael, let's shift gears. Had a couple of people reach out to me, and I've had guests on the show who has talked about AI. In fact,
Mhm.
I had a guest on the show recently that was all about AI programming. He wasn't a real estate investor at all. He approached me saying, "Hey, I want you to know that I'm using AI to help people like you get approved or not approved for loans in real estate investments faster." And I went, "Oh my goodness." Now, that's just one aspect of AI. What do you see as AI's impact on business or even real estate moving forward other than loan approval? I know that's one aspect. How do you see it?
AI is an ever evolving situation. Uh, you can ask AI, can you do this? It can't, but a month later, it can. It's changing all the time. But I see it several areas. If you wanted to design your own house, typically you had to go to an architect to get that done. Not so much anymore. AI can design houses. It can create concepts for you very quickly. If you wanted, if let's say you're building to spec a specific spec for a client, you could show them what the house would look like with different options. They don't have to visualize it in their own mind. You could show them a picture of it done by AI in a matter of seconds. And they say, "Oh, I don't know if I like that color." Hold on, change the color. I'm sure you've seen these clothing websites where you're able to change the color of the dress just by a mouse click. Well, you can do that now with the color of the walls, the type of external covering. Let's say you have brick or aluminum siding. I'm not sure what'll look right. You can take a look at that. So I think it's going to have a lot of application there. And obviously, the more customized the home is, the more important that will be because if you're someone like me, I need to see it. You can talk about it all you want. My favorite example, I say the word chair to 100 people, they'll see 100 different chairs in their head. If I show them the picture of one specific chair, they'll go, "Oh yeah, chair." You'll be able to do that with AI. And it's certainly going to help in the area of financing as well, not just approvals, but locating sources of financing. AI can help with that. AI is helping real estate agents sell houses. So I'm part of a AI and marketing program, and they part of that is they give you a programmable chatbot. And this real estate agent was so excited he cut essentially a promotional video talking about how good this was. His chatbot had a conversation with a prospective seller of a property and set up an appointment for him to go close the deal. So he walked in, said, "Okay, well, it's going to take an hour and a half. I have to go over every form." The guy had all the forms laid out, ready to be signed, and he asked where Cynthia was. Who's Cynthia? The chatbot. He thought or I think it was a female, was a real person.
Wow.
And the real estate agent didn't know what to say. Uh, oh, yeah, yeah. She lives 3 hours away. She works remotely, so she couldn't come by. And the seller was disappointed
Yeah.
that it, so they weren't trying to hide it that was a chatbot, but they weren't broadcasting it either. So, and that was at least 6 months ago,
That's
which
amazing.
is an eternity in the AI world. So it's getting better and better now.
Hmm. Oh my goodness. Um, if a listener is interested in contacting you, Michael, how do they get a hold of you?
The easiest way to do that is by email,
Okay.
Michael, that's Michael, at askmichael.ca.
Perfect. AskMichael.ca. I just want to make a note for everybody out there who's interested in this triple C method that involves the Canadian corporation owning the Wyoming C Corp, owning an LLC, and all of that. That's on page 38 of Michael's book, A to Zen Real Estate, Peace of Mind Strategy for Canadian Investor. You can get it Amazon, you can get it all kinds of places. Yeah, audio and physical book providers. Michael, any parting thoughts?
The number one thing for you to keep in mind is in order to be successful as a real estate investor, there's three parts to that success. One is you need to get some training. Two, you need a coach or a mentor that you can ask questions of as you're going through your real estate journey. And three, you need to take action. If you take action without experience and training, you could go off in the wrong direction. If you're looking to know everything before you take action, you'll never do anything. So have that training, having that mentor or coach, and taking action. That's the way you're going to be a successful real estate investor.
Michael, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me.